What does it take to build a family? For Officer Ethan Collins, it took courage, compassion, and an open heart. When he adopted 6 orphaned black girls, he faced challenges he couldn't have imagined. But through all the trials and triumphs, his love never wavered. Now, decades later, his daughters are giving back in a way that will bring tears to your eyes. This is a story of resilience, gratitude, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The small town of Maplewood, nestled in the rolling hills of the Midwest, was a quiet and familiar place for Officer Ethan Collins. Known for his steady demeanor and commitment to his job, Ethan had become a cornerstone of the community over his 2-decade career. But beneath the surface of the kind and reliable officer lay a man struggling with a heavy heart. Ethan's house, a modest 2-story home on the edge of town, had been a place of dreams. He and his late wife, Lauren, had imagined it filled with laughter and the pitter-patter of little feet. They had talked endlessly about the family they would build, the memories they would create. But when Lauren passed away unexpectedly, those dreams shattered. Ethan buried himself in his work, the silence at home a constant reminder of the life he had lost. One crisp autumn afternoon, Ethan sat in his patrol car parked along Main Street, sipping a lukewarm cup of coffee. The leaves painted the town in hues of gold and crimson, but Ethan barely noticed. His mind wandered to the past, to Lauren's laughter, her plans for their future. He let out a heavy sigh, shaking his head to pull himself back to the present. Suddenly, the crackle of his radio broke the silence. "All units, we have a situation at 1456 Maple Lane. Possible child abandonment case. Multiple minors reported. Proceed with caution." Ethan's stomach tightened as he reached for the radio. "Unit 5 responding. ETA 5 minutes. Switching on the siren, Ethan steered his cruiser toward the address. Maple Lane was a part of town that had seen better days. Rows of dilapidated houses with peeling paint and overgrown lawns. As he approached the small, crumbling house, he noticed the blinds pulled shut, the yard littered with broken toys. A chill ran down his spine. Parking the car, Ethan stepped out and approached the front door cautiously. He could hear faint sounds inside, soft whimpers, like a child crying. He knocked firmly. "Police, is anyone home?" The only response was the muffled sound of crying growing louder. His instincts kicked in. Reaching for the door handle, he found it unlocked and pushed the door open. The stale air of the house hit him, a mix of neglect and sorrow. Inside, the scene stopped Ethan in his tracks. 6 young girls huddled together in the corner of the barren living room, their wide eyes filled with fear. The youngest, barely a toddler, clung to the arm of the oldest, who couldn't have been older than 10. The walls were bare, the furniture sparse. The girls wore mismatched clothes, their faces streaked with tears. Ethan's heart broke at the sight. He crouched down, keeping his voice soft. "Hey there. My name's Ethan. I'm a police officer and I'm here to help. Are you girls okay?" The oldest girl hesitated, her small frame trembling as she tightened her grip on her siblings. Finally, she spoke, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "Our parents, they haven't come home. It's been a long time. We're scared." Ethan nodded gently, trying to put them at ease. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Maya," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And these are your sisters?" Maya nodded, her arms protectively around the younger ones. "Simone, Tiana, Zoe, Lila, and Jasmine," she said, pointing to each of them in turn. Ethan's chest ached as he looked at the girls, their small faces etched with worry. "Maya, do you know where your parents might be?" Maya shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. "They went out one night and they didn't come back. I don't know what happened." Ethan swallowed hard, trying to keep his emotions in check. It didn't take long for him to piece together what might have happened. He radioed for backup and child protective services, his heart heavy. While he waited, he knelt down to the girl's level again. "You're very brave, Maya," he said, his voice steady. "I promise. We'll figure this out together. You're not alone anymore." It wasn't long before social workers arrived, their voices calm but clinical as they assessed the situation. Ethan learned that the girls' parents had died in a car accident days earlier, and the girls had been left to fend for themselves. With no immediate family to take them in, the sisters faced separation into different foster homes. As Ethan watched the social workers discussing the girl's fate, he felt a pull deep in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. The thought of these girls being torn apart, losing each other after already losing so much, was unbearable. He found himself speaking before he even realized it. What if I took them? The room fell silent, all eyes turning to Ethan in disbelief. Even he was surprised at his own words. But as he looked back at the 6 girls, scared, vulnerable, and clutching onto one another, he felt a clarity he hadn't experienced in years. Linda, the lead social worker, approached him cautiously. "Officer Collins, I appreciate your concern, but taking in 6 children is a monumental decision. Are you sure you understand what you're saying?" Ethan nodded, his voice steady. "I understand, but I can't stand by and watch them be separated. They've already lost so much. They deserve to stay together." Linda studied him for a long moment, then glanced back at the girls who were watching him with wide, hopeful eyes. Finally, she said, "Let's talk about what this would mean. It's not a decision to be made lightly." Ethan nodded again, his resolve unshaken. "Whatever it takes." As he knelt down to the girls once more, Maya looked up at him, her voice filled with hesitation but also hope. You'd keep us together?" Ethan smiled gently, his eyes meeting hers. "I would. If you'll have me, I'd like to be your family." For the first time, a flicker of relief crossed Maya's face. She nodded slowly, holding her sisters close. Ethan felt something shift inside him, an unfamiliar but welcome warmth. For the first time since losing Lauren, he felt the stirrings of purpose. The following days were a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings, and sleepless nights for Officer Ethan Collins. The decision he had made to adopt 6 orphaned sisters shocked not only himself, but the entire town of Maplewood. Word of his actions spread quickly, and soon enough everyone in the community, from the diner waitress to his colleagues at the station, had an opinion on what he was doing. "You're really going through with this, huh?" Sergeant Mike Pearson, Ethan's longtime partner and closest friend, asked over coffee at the station. His tone was skeptical but tinged with genuine concern. Ethan sipped his coffee, his face calm but resolute. "Yeah, I am. Those girls need someone, Mike. They've already lost enough." Mike leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "Ethan, I respect what you're trying to do, but 6 kids? 6 black kids? You're a single white guy in a small town. Have you thought about the challenges that come with this?" Ethan placed his mug down, his jaw tightening. "I've thought about it every waking second since I found them. And yeah, I know it's going to be hard. But those girls deserve to stay together, and I'm not going to let them be separated. I may not have all the answers, but I'll figure it out. They need someone who won't give up on them." Mike shook his head, a mix of admiration and concern in his eyes. "You're a stubborn man, Collins. Just don't forget to ask for help when you need it." Ethan smiled faintly. "I won't. Thanks, Mike." Later that afternoon, Ethan sat in the cramped office of Linda Green, the lead social worker overseeing the case. Piles of files cluttered her desk, and the room smelled faintly of old paper and stale coffee. Linda adjusted her glasses and looked at Ethan with a mixture of curiosity and caution. "Officer Collins," she began, her tone professional but kind, "I need you to understand the magnitude of what you're proposing. Raising 6 children, 6 black girls in particular, isn't something to take lightly. They've been through a significant trauma, and they'll need more than just a roof over their heads. They'll need emotional support, stability, and someone who's willing to understand their unique experiences." Ethan nodded, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. "I understand, Linda. I won't pretend that I know everything, but I'm willing to learn. I've spent my life protecting this community, and now I have a chance to protect these girls. I'm not going to let them down." Linda leaned forward, studying him intently. "The town will talk, you know. People might not understand why you're doing this, and the girls will face challenges. They already have. Are you ready to stand by them, even when it gets tough?" Ethan met her gaze, his voice steady. "I've faced plenty of challenges in my life, Linda. This will be the hardest thing I've ever done, but I'm ready. Those girls need someone to believe in them, and I'm not backing down." After a long pause, Linda sighed, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. You're either the most stubborn or the most courageous man I've ever met. Probably both. Let's get started. The process was grueling. Background checks, home inspections, interviews with child psychologists. It seemed endless. But Ethan pushed through, determined to prove that he could provide a stable, loving home for Maya, Simone, Tiana, Zoe, Lila, and Jasmine. When the day finally came for the girls to move in, Ethan stood nervously in the living room of his home, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. He had spent the past week transforming his quiet, orderly house into a space fit for 6 children. Bunk beds now filled 2 of the bedrooms, the walls adorned with posters of cartoon characters and colorful decals. He had even taken advice from Mrs. Henrietta, a kind church elder, on how to stock the pantry with snacks and meals the girls might like. As the social worker's van pulled up outside, Ethan took a deep breath and stepped onto the porch. The girls climbed out, clutching small bags of belongings and each other's hands. Maya led the way, her expression cautious but curious. The younger girls followed closely, their wide eyes scanning their new surroundings. Ethan crouched down as they approached, offering a warm smile. "Welcome home, girls." For a moment, they simply stared at him, unsure of what to say or do. Then, to his surprise, Maya stepped forward and nodded. "Thank you for keeping us together." Ethan's chest tightened with emotion and he nodded back. "Always." The first morning after the girls moved in, Ethan woke up to the sound of pots clanging in the kitchen. He hurried downstairs, worried about what he might find. Sure enough, the kitchen was chaos. Zoe, the bookworm of the group, was standing on a chair trying to reach the cereal on the top shelf, while Lila was attempting to pour milk into a bowl and had spilled half of it on the counter. "Good morning, girls," Ethan said, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Good morning, Mr. Ethan," Zoe said, her face as serious as ever. "We didn't want to wake you, so we tried to make breakfast ourselves." Ethan chuckled, taking the cereal box from Zoe's hands and setting it on the counter. "I appreciate the effort, but let's try to work as a team next time. Deal?" The girls nodded, though Zoe added, "But we're used to taking care of ourselves." Ethan's smile faltered. He knew they were telling the truth. Losing their parents had forced them to grow up too fast. "Well, you don't have to do that anymore," he said softly. "We're a family now. We'll take care of each other." Building trust with the girls was no easy feat. Maya, the eldest, tried to shoulder the burden of responsibility, often acting more like a parent than a sibling. She hovered over her sisters, keeping them in line and making sure they didn't bother Ethan too much. While her intentions were good, it became clear that she wasn't allowing herself to relax or feel at home. One evening, Ethan found Maya sitting on the front porch, staring out at the darkening street. He brought out 2 mugs of hot cocoa and handed one to her. "Thanks," she said quietly, cradling the warm mug in her hands. "You don't have to do it all, you know," Ethan said, taking a sip of his cocoa. Maya frowned. "Do what?" "Take care of everyone. That's my job now. You've been doing it for so long, but you don't have to carry that weight anymore. You're still a kid too, Maya. You deserve to just be yourself." For a moment, Maya didn't say anything. Then she looked at Ethan, her brown eyes filled with uncertainty. What if you change your mind? What if you decide this is too much?" Ethan's heart ached. "That's not going to happen," he said firmly. "You girls are stuck with me. We're in this together, okay?" Maya hesitated, then gave a small nod. It wasn't complete trust yet, but it was a start. Ethan quickly realized that raising 6 black daughters as a white man in a small town came with unique challenges. The first hurdle came when Tiana, the athletic middle child, approached him with a hairbrush in one hand and a frustrated expression on her face. "Mr. Ethan, can you braid my hair?" she asked, holding up the brush. Ethan froze, staring at her as if she had asked him to solve a complex math problem. I can try?" Tiana sighed, clearly unimpressed. "It's okay. I'll do it myself." But Ethan wasn't ready to give up so easily. That evening, he did some research and watched a dozen YouTube tutorials on styling natural hair. The next morning, he approached Mrs. Henrietta, an elder at the church who had already been a source of advice and guidance. "Mrs. Henrietta, I need your help," Ethan confessed, holding up a comb and a pack of hairbands. "I need to learn how to do the girls' hair." She let out a hearty laugh, patting his shoulder. "Bless your heart, Officer Collins. You're trying, and that's what matters. Come by my house this afternoon and I'll teach you everything you need to know. By the end of the week, Ethan still wasn't an expert, but he managed to braid Tiana's hair into neat cornrows for the first time. Her surprise and slight smile were worth all the effort. "Thanks," she mumbled, her voice soft but genuine. "You're welcome," Ethan replied. "But if I mess up, you have to promise to tell me." The turning point in their bond came one stormy night. A loud clap of thunder woke Ethan, and he instinctively went to check on the girls. He found Jasmine, the youngest, curled up in a corner of her bed, clutching her blanket and trembling. "Hey, sweetheart," Ethan said gently, kneeling beside her. "What's wrong?" "I don't like storms," she whispered, her voice shaking. Without hesitation, Ethan scooped her up into his arms. "Well, how about we face it together?" He carried her downstairs to the living room and turned on a small lamp to chase away the shadows. One by one, the other girls trickled in, drawn by the light and the sound of Ethan's voice as he told stories to distract Jasmine from the storm. Soon, all 6 girls were huddled together with Ethan on the couch, their laughter mixing with the sound of rain against the windows. For the first time, the girls felt truly safe. And for the first time, Ethan felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. Over the next few months, the Collins household began to find its rhythm. There were still arguments and challenges. Mornings were chaotic, and Ethan often felt like he was juggling too many responsibilities. But the moments of joy outweighed the struggles. The girls slowly began to open up to Ethan, sharing stories about their parents and their favorite memories. Ethan listened intently, encouraging them to keep those memories alive. And while Ethan still had much to learn, he realized that love and effort were the foundation of their growing family. Each small victory, whether it was successfully braiding hair, helping with homework, or sharing a laugh over dinner, felt like a step forward. The Collins house was no longer a quiet, lonely place. It was loud, messy, and full of life. It was a home. One sunny afternoon, Ethan sat on the porch going through a pile of bills when Maya approached him with a worried expression. "Dad?" she began hesitantly, still adjusting to calling him that. "Can we talk?" Ethan set down the envelope in his hand and motioned for her to sit next to him. "Of course. What's on your mind?" "It's Tiana," Maya said, glancing toward the house. "She's been really upset lately. Some kids at school have been saying things." Ethan's jaw tightened. "What kinds of things?" Maya hesitated, then whispered. "They called her a name, a bad one. And they said she doesn't belong here." Ethan's heart sank. He'd always known that racism was a reality, but hearing that it had directly impacted one of his daughters made his stomach churn. "Thank you for telling me, Maya. I'll talk to her." That evening, Ethan knocked on Tiana's bedroom door. When she didn't respond, he opened it gently and found her sitting on the bed, staring out the window. "Tiana," he said softly, stepping inside. "Can we talk?" She didn't turn to look at him. "What's there to talk about?" Ethan sat down on the edge of the bed, giving her space but making it clear he wasn't going anywhere. "Maya told me what happened at school. I'm so sorry you had to go through that." Tiana's hands clenched into fists. "It doesn't matter," she said, her voice trembling. "Nothing's going to change. People are always going to see me as different, even here, even with you." Ethan felt a pang of guilt and helplessness. "Tiana, I can't pretend to know exactly how you feel, but I want you to know that I'm here for you. You don't have to face this alone." For a moment, Tiana didn't respond. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, "You don't get it, Dad. You never will." Tensions reached a boiling point a few weeks later. Tiana had been withdrawn and irritable, lashing out at her sisters and even Ethan. One evening, after an argument over curfew, she stormed out of the house. "Where are you going?" Ethan called after her, his voice tinged with worry. "Anywhere but here," she yelled, slamming the door behind her. Ethan's heart raced. He knew she wasn't just angry. She was hurting. Without wasting a moment, he grabbed his keys and jumped into his car, driving through the quiet streets of town, searching for any sign of her. Panic set in as the minutes turned into hours. Finally, he spotted her sitting alone on a bench at the park, her head in her hands. Ethan parked and approached her cautiously. "Tiana," he said softly, sitting down beside her, I've been looking everywhere for you." She didn't look up. "Why? So you can tell me what I did wrong again?" Ethan took a deep breath, steadying his voice. "No, I just want to listen. Tell me what's going on, Tiana. Please." She finally looked at him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't belong here, Dad. Everywhere I go, people stare at me like I don't fit in, like I'm not supposed to be here. And no matter how hard you try, you can't change that." Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted so desperately to take away her pain, but he knew he couldn't fix everything. "You're right," he admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "I can't change how other people see the world, but I can change how you see yourself. Tiana, you are strong, smart, and beautiful. You belong wherever you choose to be, and no matter what anyone says, I'll always be here to remind you of that." Tiana stared at him for a long moment before finally leaning into his side. "I just want it to be easier," she whispered. "I know, sweetheart," Ethan said, wrapping his arm around her. "And I'll do everything I can to make it better. We'll figure it out together." The next day, Ethan contacted Mrs. Henrietta, who suggested he connect Tiana with some role models in the community. "Sometimes what she needs isn't you," Mrs. Henrietta explained gently. "She needs to see people who've walked in her shoes." Ethan took the advice to heart, arranging for Tiana to spend time with a local women's basketball coach who had grown up in similar circumstances. Over the weeks, Ethan noticed a change in Tiana. She started smiling more, her confidence slowly rebuilding. One evening, she approached Ethan in the kitchen while he was preparing dinner. "Dad," she said hesitantly, "thanks for not giving up on me." Ethan turned to her, his heart swelling. "Never, Tiana. Not in a million years." The challenges didn't disappear overnight. The girls continued to face prejudice and adversity, but they also learned to draw strength from each other and from Ethan. At home, they shared stories about their experiences and supported one another in navigating the complexities of their identities. Ethan, for his part, made it a priority to educate himself. He read books on Black history, attended cultural events with the girls, and had long, sometimes uncomfortable conversations with them about race and privilege. He knew he couldn't change the world, but he could change how he raised his daughters. Together they began to find their rhythm as a family, and as they faced each trial, their bond grew stronger, forged in love, trust, and resilience. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. They were a family, and nothing could change that. The years flew by in the Collins household, each one marked by milestones that Ethan had never imagined when he made the decision to adopt 6 orphaned girls. The once quiet home was now a lively hub of laughter, tears, and chaos as Maya, Simone, Tiana, Zoe, Lila, and Jasmine grew into confident young women. For Ethan, every day was a testament to the strength of their bond and the incredible journey they had embarked on together. Maya, the eldest, took on the role of protector early on and had grown into a compassionate and driven young woman. At 22, she had just graduated from college with a degree in social work and was already working with foster children, determined to give back to kids who shared a story similar to hers. Simone, now 20, had transformed into a talented artist whose paintings explored themes of identity and resilience. Her work had earned her a scholarship to art school, where her professors often praised her for the emotional depth and raw honesty in her pieces. Tiana, the family's athlete, had taken her basketball talent to new heights, earning a spot on her college's varsity team. She often teased Ethan about his attempts to coach her in the backyard during her high school years, but admitted that his encouragement had pushed her to pursue her dreams. Zoe, ever the bookworm, was deep into her studies as a freshman in college. She had a quiet determination about her, and Ethan was proud to see her working on her first novel, a story inspired by their unconventional family. Lila, now 17, had discovered her passion for activism. She spent her free time organizing community events and raising awareness about social issues. Ethan often joked that she could be the mayor one day, a thought that always brought a mischievous grin to her face. Jasmine, the youngest at 14, was still figuring out her place in the world, but had a heart full of compassion. She was deeply involved in volunteering and spent weekends helping at the local animal shelter. "Dad," she often told Ethan, "taking care of others is what you taught us." While his daughters were thriving, Ethan began to notice changes in himself that he couldn't ignore. At first it was small things, a persistent cough, occasional fatigue, but over time the symptoms worsened. He found himself short of breath after climbing the stairs and needing longer naps to recover from what should have been ordinary days. He chalked it up to age. "You're not as young as you used to be, Ethan," he told himself, brushing off his daughter's concerned glances when he waved away their offers to help. He couldn't bring himself to tell them what was really happening. They were all on the brink of greatness, and he didn't want to cast a shadow over their bright futures. It was a warm summer afternoon when everything changed. The family had gathered in the backyard for a barbecue to celebrate Zoe's acceptance into a prestigious writing program. The smell of burgers sizzling on the grill mixed with the sound of the girls' laughter as they reminisced about childhood memories. Ethan stood by the grill, flipping patties and stealing glances at his daughters. They were everything he could have hoped for and more, strong, independent, and united. As he reached for the tongs, a wave of dizziness hit him. The world blurred and his knees buckled. "Dad!" Maya's voice cut through the haze as she rushed to his side. Simone grabbed a chair while Tiana helped steady him. Ethan tried to wave them off, but his vision darkened, and the last thing he heard was Jasmine's frantic plea. "Someone call an ambulance!" Ethan woke up in a hospital bed, the sterile white walls a sharp contrast to the warmth of the backyard. His daughters were gathered around him, their faces etched with worry. "Dad," Maya said softly, her voice trembling, "why didn't you tell us you were feeling sick?" Ethan looked at them, his heart heavy with guilt. "I didn't want to worry you," he admitted. "You're all doing so well. I didn't want to hold you back." Simone squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her face. "We're your daughters, Dad. You've never held us back. You've always lifted us up. Let us do the same for you." The doctor entered, breaking the emotional moment with a grim diagnosis: Stage 3 lung cancer. The road ahead would be long and grueling, filled with chemotherapy, radiation, and an uncertain prognosis. Ethan Collins sat quietly in the hospital chair, the hum of medical machines a constant reminder of his fragile state. The words, "Stage 3 lung cancer," echoed in his mind like a haunting refrain. For a man who had spent decades protecting his community and family, the idea of being vulnerable was unsettling. But as he looked up and saw his daughters surrounding him, their faces a blend of determination and love, he realized that this battle wasn't his alone. It was theirs. Maya, the eldest, immediately stepped into the role of coordinator. Her social work training made her a natural at navigating the complexities of the healthcare system. She became Ethan's advocate, asking detailed questions during doctor appointments and researching every available treatment option. "We're not leaving any stone unturned," Maya said one evening, spreading out brochures and medical notes across the kitchen table. "Dad, you're going to get through this." Ethan smiled at her, his voice soft but firm. "I trust you, sweetheart." Simone brought color and life to an otherwise sterile and monotonous hospital room. She decorated the walls with her latest artwork: vibrant landscapes, abstract pieces filled with bold strokes, and even portraits of their family. "This room needs hope," Simone said, hanging a painting of a sunrise on the wall across from Ethan's bed. "And if I can give you a little piece of that, then I'm doing my job." Ethan often found himself staring at her paintings during his chemotherapy sessions, the vibrant hues reminding him of the life he still had to live. Tiana, the family's athlete, decided to become Ethan's unofficial personal trainer. "We're keeping you moving, Dad," she said, pulling him off the couch one sunny afternoon. On his good days, Tiana would coax him into short walks around the neighborhood. They started small, just a few steps down the driveway, but eventually Ethan was walking to the end of the block. "You're doing great," Tiana said, her arm around his waist for support. "You're stronger than you think." Ethan chuckled, though his breathing was labored. "I think you've inherited your stubbornness from me." Zoe, ever the quiet intellectual, spent her time researching inspiring books and stories to share with Ethan. During his chemo sessions, she sat by his side, reading aloud from novels and biographies. "Here's one about a man who climbed Everest after surviving cancer," Zoe said one afternoon, her voice steady and soothing. "If he can do that, you can beat this." Ethan nodded, his eyes closed but his heart filled with hope. "Keep reading, Zoe. I like the sound of that." Lila turned her passion for activism into a mission to raise awareness about lung cancer. She organized a charity walk in their town, rallying neighbors and friends to donate to cancer research. She even got a local news station to cover the event. "Dad, look," Lila said, showing Ethan the footage of the event on her phone. Hundreds of people had gathered to walk in his honor, wearing shirts that read, "Team Ethan." Ethan's eyes misted as he watched. "You're making a difference, Lila. You always have." Jasmine, the youngest, stayed by Ethan's side almost constantly. Her quiet presence was a source of comfort, and her laughter often broke through the heaviness of his treatments. "Dad, did you know that giraffes only sleep for 5 minutes at a time?" she asked one day, grinning mischievously. Ethan chuckled, his spirits lifting. "Where do you even find these facts, Jazz?" "I read," she replied, sitting beside him on the hospital bed. "And I like making you smile." One evening, after a particularly grueling day of treatments, Ethan sat with all 6 of his daughters in the living room. The house, once so full of chaos and noise, now held a quiet stillness. "I want you all to know how much I appreciate what you're doing," Ethan said, his voice trembling with emotion. "You've taken care of me in ways I never imagined. I'm so proud of all of you." Maya reached out and took his hand. "Dad, everything we are, everything we've accomplished is because of you. You gave us a home, a family, and strength. Now we get to give that back to you." Tears filled Ethan's eyes as he looked at the women they had become. Each of them had taken the lessons he had tried to teach and amplified them, becoming more than he had ever dreamed. As the months passed, Ethan's strength slowly began to return. The treatments were grueling, and there were moments when he thought about giving up. But each time his daughters were there to remind him why he couldn't. One day, during a follow-up appointment, the doctor delivered news that brought tears of relief to the family. The treatments had worked. Ethan was declared cancer-free. "We did it, Dad!" Tiana shouted, pulling him into a hug. "No," Ethan corrected, his voice steady but filled with gratitude. "We did it together." That evening, the family gathered around the dinner table to celebrate. The room was filled with laughter, the clinking of glasses, and the warmth of shared love. Ethan looked around at his daughters, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. He raised his glass, his voice steady despite the emotion in his chest. "To my girls," he said, his eyes shining. "You've shown me what love, strength, and family truly mean. I couldn't have done this without you." As they clinked their glasses together, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. His daughters had given him the strength to fight, and now it was his turn to keep building a legacy of love, one that would last for generations. 5 years had passed since Ethan Collins received his life-altering diagnosis, and his home was once again filled with the laughter and chatter of his 6 daughters. This time, however, the occasion wasn't just a simple family dinner. It was a moment of triumph, a celebration of life, love, and resilience. The sisters had spent weeks planning a surprise for Ethan, working tirelessly to keep it under wraps. Today was the big day. Ethan thought it was a small family gathering to mark the 5-year milestone of being cancer-free. Maya had cleverly invited him to the community center under the guise of a family dinner. As they walked in, Ethan noticed the parking lot was far more crowded than he had expected. "Maya, what's going on?" he asked, suspicion creeping into his voice. Maya just smiled, her hand resting on his arm. "You'll see, Dad. Just trust me." As they entered the large, brightly lit hall, Ethan stopped in his tracks. The room was packed with people, friends, neighbors, colleagues, and community members, all waiting for him. A banner hung above them, boldly proclaiming, "Celebrating Ethan Collins, a father, a fighter, a hero." The crowd erupted into applause and cheers as Ethan stood there stunned. His daughters beamed at him, their joy and pride evident in their faces. What is this?" Ethan stammered, his voice thick with emotion. Maya hugged him tightly. "This is for you, Dad. It's time we celebrated the man who gave everything for us and so many others." Ethan was led to a seat of honor at the front of the room, where a series of speeches and tributes began. His old police partner, Dan, took the stage first, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Ethan isn't just a good cop. He's a great man. When he adopted those 6 girls, he didn't just change their lives. He changed all of ours. He showed us what real courage and love look like." Mother Henrietta from the church stepped up next, her voice warm and commanding. Ethan, you came to our church unsure of how to fit in, but you didn't let that stop you. You listened, learned, and loved. You taught all of us that family is something we build with our hearts. Even Mrs. Thompson, the town's florist who had once been skeptical of Ethan's ability to raise black daughters, shared her words. I'll admit, I had my doubts when Ethan brought those girls home. But watching them grow and thrive under his care has been one of the most beautiful transformations I've ever seen. After the community tributes, each of Ethan's daughters stepped forward to speak. Maya, ever the leader, began. Dad, you gave up everything to give us a home, a family, and a future. You never let us feel like we were less than or unloved. You taught us how to be strong, compassionate, and proud of who we are. Simone followed, holding back tears. Dad, you believed in me when I wasn't sure I could believe in myself. You supported my art, even when it didn't make sense to you. Because of you, I learned that creativity can change the world. Tiana stepped up next, her voice steady but emotional. You never gave up on me, even when I pushed you away. You showed me that real love is unconditional, and now I pass that lesson on to the young athletes I coach. One by one, Zoe, Lila, and Jasmine shared their own stories of how Ethan's love and sacrifice had shaped them into the women they were today. By the end of their speeches, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Ethan sat quietly, tears streaming down his face, as he looked at the incredible women his daughters had become. Maya stepped back to the microphone, her smile wide and mysterious. And now, Dad, we have one more surprise for you. Tiana and Simone wheeled out a large covered frame. With a dramatic flourish, they pulled the cloth away to reveal a beautifully crafted certificate and a large folder. Ethan squinted, reading the bold letters on the certificate. The Ethan Collins Foundation for Foster Care and Adoption. Ethan's jaw dropped as he looked at his daughters in disbelief. What is this? Maya knelt beside him, tears in her eyes. It's your legacy, Dad. We've started a foundation in your name to support foster kids and adoptive families. It'll provide resources, training, and financial aid to help families like ours thrive. Zoe chimed in. We want the love you gave us to ripple out into the world, Dad. This foundation will make sure your story inspires others to open their hearts and homes. Ethan's hands trembled as he held the certificate. He was overwhelmed by the magnitude of what his daughters had done. You girls, you didn't have to do this, Ethan said, his voice breaking. Tiana placed a hand on his shoulder. Yes, we did. Because you didn't just change our lives, Dad. You showed us the power of love. And now it's our turn to give that love to others. The day of the Ethan Collins Foundation launch had arrived. The community center was abuzz with excitement as people gathered to celebrate the incredible story of Ethan Collins and the legacy he and his daughters had built together. For Ethan, it was more than just a formal event. It was a culmination of love, resilience, and a life lived with purpose. Ethan stood backstage, adjusting his tie and glancing nervously at the crowd filling the hall. His daughters bustled around him, each playing their role in organizing the event. Maya, the natural leader, was coordinating with the speakers, while Simone adjusted the artwork she had created for the stage. Tiana ensured the event schedule stayed on track. Zoe double-checked the press materials, Lila greeted guests at the door, and Jasmine managed security for the large gathering. Dad, Maya said, placing a hand on his shoulder, are you ready? Ethan turned to her, his eyes soft with emotion. I'm ready, sweetheart. Let's do this. The event began with a series of speeches from community leaders, former colleagues, and families who had been directly impacted by Ethan's story. Each speaker highlighted Ethan's selflessness, his unwavering love for his daughters, and the ripple effect his decision had created in their small town and beyond. One foster mother shared, "When I read about Ethan's story, it gave me the courage to adopt 3 siblings who had been in the system for years. I never thought I could do it, but seeing what he did showed me that love is enough." A young man who had been mentored by Ethan during his police career added, "Officer Collins didn't just protect this community, he inspired it. He showed us all what it means to love without limits." As the speeches continued, Ethan sat with his daughters in the front row, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. He couldn't believe the impact their family's journey had made. Finally, It was Ethan's turn to take the stage. As he walked to the podium, the audience erupted in applause. He stood there for a moment, looking out at the sea of faces, many of whom had been part of his journey in some way. 20 years ago, Ethan began, his voice steady but emotional. I walked into an old house and found 6 little girls huddled together. They were scared, confused, and had just lost everything they knew. In that moment, I didn't just see 6 children. I saw 6 lives that deserved love, stability, and a chance to thrive. He paused, looking over at his daughters, who were watching him with tears in their eyes. What I didn't realize then was that adopting them wouldn't just change their lives. It would change mine. These girls taught me more about love, courage, and resilience than I could have ever imagined. They turned my house into a home, my life into a story worth telling. Ethan smiled as he continued. The Ethan Collins Foundation isn't about me. It's about them. It's about every child who's ever felt unwanted, every family who's ever wondered if they were enough, and every person who's ever doubted the power of love to overcome anything. He ended his speech with a heartfelt message. Family isn't defined by blood, race, or circumstance. It's defined by love. And if there's one thing I hope this foundation accomplishes, it's showing the world that love has the power to change lives, just as it changed mine. The audience rose to their feet, applauding and cheering as Ethan stepped away from the podium. His daughters joined him on stage, wrapping him in a group hug as the crowd continued to clap. After the event, the family returned to their home for a quieter celebration. The atmosphere was warm and lively, filled with laughter, stories, and the sound of baby Lauren, Ethan's granddaughter, cooing softly in her crib. The sight of his daughters and granddaughter brought Ethan a deep sense of peace. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan found himself back on the porch swing. The stars twinkled above, and the cool night breeze carried the sounds of his family's laughter from inside the house. One by one, his daughters joined him on the porch, just as they had so many times before. Maya handed him a steaming mug of tea. "You did great today, Dad," she said, smiling. Ethan shook his head. "No, we did great. This foundation, this family, it's all of us." Simone, sitting on the porch railing, added, "You always say we changed your life, Dad, but the truth is, you're the one who showed us what real love looks like." Lila chimed in, "And now we get to share that love with others. That's your legacy." Ethan looked around at his daughters, his eyes welling with tears. "You girls have given me more than I could ever repay. Seeing the women you've become, the way you've carried forward the lessons we learned together, it's more than I could have ever dreamed." Jasmine leaned her head on his shoulder. "We're just following your example, Dad." As the family sat together under the stars, Ethan felt a profound sense of fulfillment. His journey as a father had been far from easy, but every challenge, every sacrifice, and every tear had been worth it. He had built something enduring, something that would continue to grow and inspire long after he was gone. "Dad," Tiana said softly, breaking the comfortable silence, "do you ever wonder how different life would have been if you hadn't walked into that house all those years ago?" Ethan smiled, a tear slipping down his cheek. "I used to. But now I know it was the best decision I ever made. You girls didn't just change my life. You gave it meaning." As the night deepened, Ethan looked at the strong, compassionate women his daughters had become and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. His family, bound not by blood but by love, was his greatest achievement. And as he held baby Lauren in his arms, he knew their story was far from over. The Ethan Collins Foundation would touch countless lives, but it was the love and unity of his family that would remain his proudest legacy. Together, they had proven that love truly knows no boundaries, and that family is something you build with your heart. If Ethan's story of love, resilience, and family touched your heart, help us spread its message by hitting the subscribe button. Together we can share more stories of hope and kindness that remind us all of what truly matters.